It's great to be joined today by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, who is a pediatrician in Flint, Michigan, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at Michigan State University. She was key in exposing the dangerous levels of lead in Flint, Michigan's drinking water, which is a story that we've been covering for a long time. Sadly, the story is not over, and we're going to talk about that in part. Her new book is titled What the Eyes Don't See, a story of crisis, resistance, and hope in an American city. So let's go to the very beginning if we can. I mean, how did this issue of Flint's water problem get on your radar?
So it happened very much by serendipity. As a pediatrician, I take care of the children in Flint, and moms were coming in and asking about the water. Was the water safe to use to bathe my baby? Was the water safe to use to mix my baby's formula with this water? And I was very much reassuring my patients, yeah, the water's fine. Who wouldn't expect in America in the 21st century, in the middle of the Great Lakes, for the water that comes out of your tap not to be okay? So I was very much drinking the Kool-Aid from the state, reassuring the people that I was taking care of that the water was okay. So that all changed actually at my home with a high school girlfriend who happened to be over for a last minute barbecue. And my girlfriend is a water expert, and she informed me that the water was not fine, it was not safe to drink, and that it wasn't being treated properly. And without the important ingredient called corrosion control, there was going to be lead in the water. And that was the very first time that I heard about the possibility of lead, a potent, irreversible neurotoxin, into our water supply.
Now, when the parents were coming in and asking you about the safety of the water, was this just generally something that concerned parents ask about, or was there a particular reason that the parents were asking you about this in Flint, Michigan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the water switch happened in April of 2014, and I didn't get involved until about 17 months later. And throughout this period, the people of Flint were brave and heroic and loud and organized, and they knew something was wrong with the water. So right away, the water looked brown, it tasted weird. We had bacteria in the water, but then it was treated with a lot of disinfectant, so the all clear was made. And then we had so much disinfectant, which was chlorine. It irritated people's skin and eyes. And then they fixed that. So there were multiple problems with this water source. But with each problem, the state was reassuring the citizens that everything was okay. But really, they were all missed opportunities. I think the biggest missed opportunity was just several months into the water switch. General Motors, which was born in Flint, stopped using this water because it was corroding engine parts. Imagine that. Our water was corroding engine parts, but the people of Flint were being told to relax, that it was okay. So I had blinders on, just like many folks in Flint had blinders on. And that's why the title of this book is What the Eyes Don't See, because you can't see lead in water. And you can't see the problems with lead, but fundamentally, it's about people and places and problems all over in Flint and beyond that we choose not to see. And it is our duty to open our eyes and to be aware of these problems.
Once you finally realized what was going on and started making noise about it, can you talk a little bit about what strategies were used to either try to discredit the meat of what you were saying or merely to stop word from getting out?
Yeah, so, like I mentioned, the people of Flint were raising concerns and they were dismissed. So the Flint water crisis is a story of denial of democracy, denial of the voice of citizens, and very much the denial of science. So I talked about that basic science of how the engine parts were corroding. That was denied. Everybody who tried to raise a concern was discredited and dismissed, from the moms and the activists and the pastors and the journalists. And then the water scientists came in and said, hey, look, we have lead in the water. This water is 19 times more corrosive than the Great Lakes water that we had been getting. And those water scientists were being dismissed. So when I brought forth the data, the research, the science, that it was impacting our children and it was getting in their blood, I was also discredited. So Flint is another example of where science was denied. And we see this nationally happening right now, where clear-cut science on things like climate change and vaccines are also being denied. So the strategies that we invoked is is fighting back with more science. We every number, every evidence, every fact in my research was not a number. It was a child. It was a child who I probably cared for. So we really fought back with more science, and ultimately at that point the media started to become an important player in the uncovering of the story, and helped really finally turn the tide, and the state conceded.
Why is lead bad for the body? I mean, now we know this. For a long time, we didn't. And in fact, lead was used in the production of all sorts of different goods that humans came in contact with all the time. But what are the health risks?
That's a great question, David. So we've been using lead for centuries, and actually we've known about its badness for centuries. The Romans first put lead in their aqueducts. The word lead actually comes from the Latin plumbum. The elemental symbol for lead is Pb. It was so malleable. So even back then, many people hypothesized the demise of the Romans was because they used so much lead, not only in plumbing, but they also added it to their food, which was terrible. But we put lead in gasoline because there was a profit to be made. We put lead in paint. We have greedily, corporations have put lead in a lot of industrial goods that have continued to poison people for generations now and to come. When pediatricians hear the word lead, we really freak out because we know what it does to children. It is potent, it is irreversible, it is a neurotoxin. It fundamentally attacks the everything of what a child is and does. It impacts cognition, how children think, dropping IQ levels. It impacts behavior, causes developmental delays, and it's even been linked to criminalities. So levels that we thought were okay decades ago, incredible science has now taught us that there is no safe level of lead in a child. So yes, it's been great that people's lead levels have been dropping over the last few decades as we got lead out of paint and gasoline, but we should be paying more attention because we now know there is no safe level. And we also know that the lowest levels can actually cause considerable decline in children's cognition and behavior. And what's most striking is that lead is a form of environmental injustice, a form of environmental racism. Our kids in Flint already had higher lead levels, just like kids in Detroit and Chicago and Baltimore and some of these cities with our most vulnerable children are already disproportionately exposed to lead.
We sometimes in corporate media, we see that stories go away after they've sort of run their course, but that doesn't necessarily mean the problem has been solved. We saw this, for example, in the aftermath of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico, which is a really notable example. Just because we're not hearing as much about what's going on in Flint at this point in corporate media, is everything fine now with the water there?
No, and that's absolutely why I wrote this book. When I started this 2.5 years ago, I knew that we would need a way to shine a spotlight back on Flint because our story is nowhere near over. We had 18 months of corrosive water that ran through our system that ate up our pipes. Those are being replaced, so that's great news. But until those are replaced, people still are on filtered water and bottled water. But where I spend most of my time is in terms of the recovery of the children. We can't take away this crisis, but we are very much, and very much what this book hopes to share is a story of resistance, of activism, and of hope. So science was denied in Flint. Science ultimately spoke truth to power, and we are using the incredible science of child development and resilience to buffer the impact of this crisis. And that is hope, and that is what we're hoping to share. So we have things in place in Flint that aren't being done anywhere else in this country. For example, childcare services and home visiting programs and universal preschool and early literacy support and Medicaid expansion. But these are things that all children need everywhere. So we are leveraging this crisis to make sure that our children who did nothing wrong besides live in a city that was almost bankrupt, lost democracy, and didn't treat its water properly, do not see the consequences of this crisis. So that is what is happening in Flint. So Flint is really a model of a crisis, but really a model of how we can turn this crisis around and really serve as an example to other communities where children are suffering from very similar toxicities, be it the toxicity of poverty or violence or lost democracy.
The book is great, but it is about a very, very dark chapter in American history. I mean, I don't think that's going too far to say that. The book is called What the Eyes Don't See, a story of crisis, resistance, and hope in an American city. We've been speaking with the book's author, Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for exposing this, because it could have easily been covered up for much longer, and
Absolutely.
we're all, it's horrible, but we're all better off that it was exposed when it did and not a year or two later.
It's true. Thank you.